Welcome to my series, How to Make an Independent Low-Budget Film. I am here with the creators, producer, writer, and directors of the movie Future Date, Patrick Dorsey and Stanley Wong, and they're going to walk us through how they got this movie made, a movie that is currently in its festival run and doing very well, doing very well. I'm going to go ahead and give you some background on the movie so your listeners will know what it's about. In the distant future, where the outside climate is unlivable and everyone is forced to spend their lives alone in tiny rooms, two people win the rare opportunity to go on a very unusual date in person.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I'll give a little synopsis here from you guys, the Future Date Seed and Spark page. In the distant future, climate change is so bad people can't go outside. All but the rich are confined to tiny solo apartments. It sucks. Rye and Rhea are two of those sad souls. Desperately lonely, Rye wants to meet the one. Overlooked at her job, Rhea wants to afford a real house. Both are selected to be in a contest. They will spend 3 days together in an old-fashioned house to see if they're compatible. If they are, they get to keep the house and each other's company forever. They hit it off despite having no experience around people and Rhea not wanting a relationship. But soon their secrets and shortcomings get in the way, potentially derailing what they really need: true human connection. Yes,
Wow. Yeah. Lays it all out.
lays it all out. Yeah, so welcome, guys. Definitely interested in how you put this movie together. And even from those blurbs, you can see the thought that was put into it, knowing this is like just you guys making a movie, no big investor backing, no like studio backing, no huge stars. Like from conception, this is a movie made about two people.
Yeah. Um, for sure. I'm trying to think. This was definitely an indie movie, almost through and through. I think all of our attempts at like trying to make it bigger, or I guess even from the start, we knew that, like from the start, we were just like, okay, no one is really going to be making this movie for us or even any movie for us. So we decided from the ground up to be like, we need to make a movie that we can make no matter what. So yeah, that was kind of like the big, I feel like, initial push.
Yeah, for sure. Like Stanley and I, we met in an improv class at UCB in like 2013, I think. And we had done a bunch of like sketches together and like sketch videos um and we had written a couple of feature scripts that were clearly like we couldn't make them. They were too expensive. Um and then Stanley's more the director, I'm more the writer, and he'd done a bunch of shorts, and we were all just sort of like waiting around for our opportunity, and we just Stanley was like, we got to make our opportunity.
Mhm.
and
But
and
like,
I was
I would say it wasn't even that we were waiting. Like
yeah.
we were like submitting to
Hmm.
contests and fellowships, like all these like opportunity things that we were told to do. But like,
Right.
whether or not we were good enough or whether we were making the right thing, we just found that like we were slipping through the cracks. Like no one was giving us permission to make our big thing. And I guess, it just kind of dawned me. I was like, we just got to do it. Like, no, like, it's like that Mark Duplass, he had like a big South by Southwest thing where he says like you need to be the cavalry long enough for you to realize like the cavalry's never coming and you're gonna mention you just gotta be the cavalry until you realize that like yeah, you don't need them anymore. Yeah.
Right. So to give people a background, where did you stand industry wise before this movie? And it's yeah, because I think a lot of people always assume like, oh, they had connections or they're somebody's relative or something anytime a movie gets made, and not realizing a lot of times it's people from nowhere who ended up in LA. So what was your background like before Future Date?
Technically I had a little bit more in that like even before I moved out to LA, I actually had made another feature film. It was sort of like maybe a similar beginnings, but this was like me just post out of college. Uh, I
Right.
made a feature film that was only $6,000 production budget. So like, I mean, in hindsight, I don't even know how I did it, but like, yeah, we just made a, at that point, I guess it's like a micro budget film, and we did it, and then we went through kind of like a small festival run, but it obviously didn't blow up. But like in hindsight, I think for a very small movie, it was quite good. But it just didn't blow up in the way that we thought we would. So I think from then
Right.
on, I was like, let me kind of just make shorts, and I had a little bit of a I think after that movie, I did have like a little bit of a career, like becoming character actors in large studio movies. I'm originally from Louisiana, so I actually did. Uh, I had some early success landing in like movies like 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street, and like The Big Short. Kind of playing like the Asian nerdy token role in like all these bigger movies. So in some ways, I had connections, but I do feel like none of anyone that I knew directly from any of that didn't necessarily directly contribute to this current movie at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just like sort of a little clarification on Stanley, your first movie. Like you technically weren't the director and you made it with like
Right.
five other guys, I think. Five there.
Well,
And
it was like a
so it's
group
kind
of
of like
five
this, yeah.
five friends from film school that we all kind of like collectively did. I was uh I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think all the credits I had on that one. I was like
I mean, you
sort
were
of
the lead actor. Like
was
the story was about you. Yeah.
lead actor, editor, producer, and story writer. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
kind of
But it,
doing everything to get it made.
I mean,
yeah.
And everybody had multiple roles and just did
oh,
whatever.
almost certainly, yeah.
No.
And even on this one, maybe I don't know at what point you stop doing everything, but I'm still doing everything. Yeah.
Patrick, what about you? What was your background?
Yeah, so I don't really have a film background. I went to film school my freshman year and was like, I don't know if I'm cut out to like go out into the industry on my own as like a super introverted person who didn't necessarily have a lot of background making stuff. So I switched to journalism and I was in journalism for a really long time, but I never gave up the love of film. And so
Right.
yeah, and so I was just doing a bunch of stuff on the side and then eventually left my journalism job. At ESPN, and one of the projects I was working on right after that was this feature. So yeah, I had basically zero connections or any sort of industry history um,
Right.
that was applicable to an indie feature film.
Right. Well, let's talk about how Future Date really came together. Because I'm working on a low budget film too. And just in the conception of it, you have to already think about the cost, right? You get
Yeah.
like you get through the first draft or an outline and you're like, okay, what characters can I cut? What locations can I cut? And you guys had this, where did it come up with the concept of this is just going to be basically in one house, or we're going to use, so few locations to tell this story.
So for me, even with the first feature that I worked on, I think like the thing that was really important to us, and I think it was even still something that we learned from like a Mark Duplass conversation, I believe, is that like most people tend to like write a script and then they're like, okay, now I need to find the resources to write that script. But I think for if you
Or to
want
shoot
to,
it.
yeah, yeah. And I think to make an indie thing, you have to think about that from the beginning. So with our first movie and for this movie, we were definitely like, what do we have available? What resources do we already have? And then let's write around that. With mainly the idea being like, especially for us, it's like this movie is technically going to be so cheap and easy for us that like I think like the kind of rallying call is like if this movie doesn't get made, it's going to be our own fault. Like that was
Mhm.
always the thing for me. Like there should be nothing stopping us from making this movie. With Future Date, obviously we did a little bit of like a sci-fi twist and whatnot. There were certain elements that kind of we tried to elevate it because I think me and Patrick were kind of like studying kind of first features or even like
Mhm.
successful indie features, and we kind of broke it down and we're like, I think the formula is you need to find the coolest excuse possible to have two people stuck in a house. And just for us, we were like, okay, we were writing it at the time during the pandemic, and I was kind of going through the troughs of pandemic dating. So I was like, let's use this as like a frame, and yeah, kind of right around that.
And kind of on the subject of resources, one of the key elements was our VFX person, Marco Vandenbogard, I think is, I'm botching his name, I'm sorry. But yeah, Stanley had known him through a previous short that he had done, and he did this amazing like screen simulation VFX work at like a very, indie short film friendly price. He's this guy in the Netherlands,
Yeah,
and and he was great to work with apparently, and he was obviously great to work with for us. And so we knew we could do a sci-fi twist on that like two people in a house story because we had access to this guy who was going to do work that felt more, richer than we could actually afford, and
yeah,
so we were
Yeah.
going to like elevate the look of our movie for not a lot of money.
yeah. And he was involved even in the writing, like even with the
Mm.
writing process. He told us what he could accomplish, and we're like, okay, we will write around that.
Oh, fascinating. So you were able to incorporate, again, looking at your resources
Yeah,
from inside out to say, we know we can do this. Let's write that into the script. And these are the
Yeah,
kind of the limitations that we have.
yeah,
yeah, we had
yeah.
a great conversation while we were still writing the script. Like we had mo a lot of the script. Um, Maybe we had a whole draft at
I
that
think,
point,
yeah,
but we showed it to him, and a lot of the conversations that characters had in that draft were like on phone screens. We were just like, well, we're so connected, let's just take it out and make it like a 50 years into the future version of phones. And
Mm.
Marco told us that phone screen simulation is actually very difficult because people know exactly what a phone screen looks like. So he was just like, what if you make it holograms, that'll be easier for me. And we were like, oh, well,
Interesting.
holograms is so much more futuristic anyway. So just having that conversation made our film feel more futury, and it was cheaper and easier
yeah,
for
for
him. So
him.
it was kind of this like fascinating merging of needs and I don't know. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
No, that's really tight. And also interesting that it came during the pandemic, during like our lockdowns and then when things were shut down. And Stanley, you said you were dating, trying to date, trying to figure out some kind of human connection during
Yeah,
it. So this led to it being a rom-com,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
also interesting as a low budget choice, I think, because so often you hear, do horror or something, but you guys
yeah,
chose a futuristic rom-com because of the
Yeah.
post-apocalyptic situation, the way the world felt at the time.
yeah. Almost certainly, like we were like, I mean, you have to really picture. I'm trying to remember exactly when we were starting the writing process, but it might have been like late 2020, early 2021. So, like, for all
Yeah.
intents and purposes, we really thought we might not ever kind of leave those circumstances. So we were like, we need to write something that almost certainly could be made within those circumstances. The irony now is that like it took us so long to do all the VFX and stuff like that that we're now obviously completely open. Like the pandemic is like a little bit of an afterthought for us. But at the time, we were very much like, we need to not only make it within our resources, we need to make it within our circumstances. Like
Yeah.
as we were shooting, it was still a time when COVID protocols were still very much a part of things. And while it didn't cost us as much as I know for studios, it like added a huge cost. We still did have to test daily. We had to wear masks on set. It was still very much a thing we had to work around for our
Yeah.
movie.
Oh yeah, like when we were conceiving it, we were studying movies like the one that really comes to mind is Malcolm and Marie, because that was like a bubble movie. But there were
Yeah.
we were reading all these articles about these like indie bubble movies, and we were like, man, do we have to make an indie bubble movie? And yeah, it took us we spent about a year on the script, and maybe a little over a year from starting to when we actually shot. And so by that point,
Yeah.
bubbles weren't a thing anymore. But yeah, through a lot of the process, we were like, okay, we need to make this so in case we have to make it in a bubble, or we need to write this so in case we have to make it in a bubble, we can kind of do that.
But it still feels relevant because global warming is still happening. So it still feels like we could be, in the way you guys described the future in the movie, it's like the climate change and the world was so devastating that we're stuck inside. So it still feels like a prediction, like a
Yeah,
future.
for sure.
It
Like
still feels relevant.
it's certainly an allegory for a specific time, and I do think maybe in the future there will be a moment where like people will study, like see like, oh, these were pandemic movies, all these like movies that
Right.
were made within circumstance. But I do think, yeah, I mean, to be honest, yeah, I don't think it still might be a future we might run into sooner than later. Yeah.
And we've been talking about connection stuff and human isolation stuff before the pandemic even happened because
Sure.
there have been a lot of writing about this sort of in the late 2010s about like you see a lot of solo culture in places like Tokyo and solo culture and like disconnection in like rural America. And so like everything from like old people in this in this country versus like young people in hyper connected countries, and they're still just like everyone just feels like alone. And so that was sort of a fascinating thing to explore, and then it was obviously exacerbated by what we went through. But I don't think very many people, maybe I'm wrong, but I certainly don't feel like closer to people now than I did in 2019.
Yeah.
No, definitely. It's I mean, we're doing this on a Zoom, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
Zoom culture has taken over a lot. And that's something that your movie does make you think of, is like how much we're on video calls now
Mm.
and hologram calls in the future. So let's talk about putting the movie together, the physical, or your approach to raising money for the film and the things you guys did to get this film into production.
Mhm. Well, I mean, going back to like just what resources we have available, I mean, for me, you know, I'm kind of a little later in life, and I've been working for quite a while. So I did have like, for me, I was like, I cashed out like essentially like around $60,000 of like my life savings, and I was just like, no matter what, we're gonna make this movie for this amount. Like, so even from the conception, we're like, we're gonna make a $60,000 movie no matter what. If we get more, that's great. But worst comes to worst, we will make it for this amount. And I think
Yeah.
that was maybe really, that was like a good jumping off point. I think like, especially getting people on board and whatnot. To be honest, though, a lot of people were not super sure that we could pull it off at that budget. And, obviously we were able to secure more down the line. I guess, yeah, a bigger part of it was I guess to get back into it, like a larger portion of the production budget came from an investor, was someone that I knew from high school. So how I ran into him actually was that he was someone that I knew even earlier, honestly, from high school. I probably knew him from grade school, elementary or whatnot, but like I was never really close to him. But in the
Hmm.
years, post college and then even like into now, like he had been following my career, and he had
Oh,
always been like
wow.
a fan of mine, and he'd been watching my stuff. And I think it was maybe like 8 years ago or 9 years ago, I was doing a Kickstarter campaign or anyways, a crowdfunding campaign for a short film, and he did contribute. He was one of the major contributors. It wasn't a lot. Like he'd only given maybe I think like $1,000 at the time, but I was like, okay, like he believes in my work, he likes my work, and he obviously has some money to give. So I did approach him as we were like trying to figure out like some additional funds, and he right off the bat he did match our initial 60K. So now it's all of a sudden our movie became from a 60K movie to a 120K movie. And yeah, just from there, that's like that was enough for us to kind of move into product, like really start going and trying to get more people involved. But Yeah, I do think like a big part of it initially was like we were gonna make it this smaller movie. And in some ways, like it is a 60K. Like obviously I think the realities as we were kind of like going further into it, we realized like, oh, there's more costs involved than we thought. And I think that, yeah, that just kind of we had to kind of address things as they came.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, I think a big part of it was like I had someone that I'd made, I'm trying to think how many shorts, maybe like 5 to 8 like larger shorts or something that had gone through festivals and I've been on the internet. Some of them have gone viral and whatnot, but like I do think that was a big part of it is having like a library of work that has been seen. And I think an important lesson for me, especially, is like I've been making these shorts thinking like, okay, maybe they're not going to Sundance, maybe they're not all going viral, but there's like a saying they say it's like it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And that to me was like exemplified from this. I was just like, whoa, this guy who I didn't know I was I didn't know he was a huge fan of mine, but he was. And in reaching out to him again, he was like, yeah, like I can help you get this movie further along. So yeah, that was a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. And I think that's actually there's something in that that's I think a commonality for a lot of low budget films. It's like the money comes from an unexpected source. And I think a lot of times a lot of the money for films comes from one source, not 30, not 40, but out of nowhere, somebody who's been following you, somebody who's interested in the subject. This is just a tale that I've heard over and over again.
Yeah, there's kind of this myth like about crowdfunding that has kind of persisted, I think. And maybe everybody knows it, but it doesn't seem like everyone's saying it where like the the theory on crowdfunding can be like if you just put your project out there, then all these people will just come to you and like gradually build you up and you can
Right.
do it. And it's like usually and like this was our experience because we did crowdfund a little bit for like some finishing funds. Um and we've talked to some other people who've done similar things, and it just like the crowdfunding money tends to come in small chunks from people you already know. But unless you have like a really engaged fan base who like of people who don't know you necessarily. So if you're a content creator who's really prolific and have done, incredible work to
Right.
like all the work that entails to actually building your fan base and staying engaged with them, unless you're that, you're just not going to get like the crowd isn't going to come to you because the crowd doesn't know how to find you, and the crowd doesn't necessarily know who you are anyway. And so yeah, it is like you said, the one source thing is kind of if you get if you manage to find that one person in there, um that's going to be a lot more uh just a lot more successful than going like I'm going to put my GoFundMe out there and
Right.
if you build it, they will come. And it's like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
saw, go ahead, Stanley.
yeah, just to reiterate, like for that first crowdfunding campaign, like I only raised $5,000, but yeah, one of those people ended up being the main investor for this movie. And for that very reason, like I do think that like crowdfunding is a good way of
Mhm.
finding those people who will invest in your future things. But I will say, like, after doing the full crowdfunding campaign for this movie, we didn't even find anyone who necessarily was going to do that. I mean, maybe it remains to be seen. Maybe in the future, someone will come back and be like, "Oh, I saw Future Day finally, and now I'll invest in your next one." But like, yeah, it's certainly not a guarantee. And I
No,
I don't know if this is always true, but I always when I'm in the thick of it, I'm always like, man, doing these crowdfunding campaigns are more effort than the amount of money that we actually receive from them. Yeah.
that's that's the way I've all long felt about crowdfunding. It's like that's almost making its own movie. It's doing a crowdfunding campaign in terms
Yes.
of effort and energy put into it. So
And just
Yeah.
so much like emotional energy too, because when, the
right.
days that nothing comes in, you feel like what value do I have? And
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's pretty tough.
You're like, I gotta pump it out more, message
Ugh,
it, embed it everywhere. And then
yeah.
it's like 0, 0 for like 10 days straight. It's overwhelming and kudos to the people that have had successful campaigns.
Oh yeah.
I'm
Well,
very
I mean, yeah.
very proud of you. Anybody out there listening.
Well, it's like marketing and audience building and all of those things are incredibly specified skills.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you don't have experience in that, and also I think it takes a certain type of personality too. And so if you have the combination of personality and skill, you can really pull it off. But if you don't, then you feel like what's wrong with me if I can't pull it off. And that's just, yeah, you don't necessarily possess that at this moment, and maybe never. I don't know.
Yeah. So you have some money to get started, or you have your budget basically. How do you build a team that's going to help you bring this movie home?
Uh,
All the tradespeople, cinematography, your casting. We'll get into casting a bit, which Stanley was also one of the stars of the movie. So
yeah.
that's a great budget saver right there. Is just cast yourself in the movie.
Budget
Um,
and like time saver too. Yeah.
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 I mean, I will say, like, one piece of advice that we were given was to get the best people you can get for scale, which is essentially like for the ultra low budget like bracket that we were in, that's like $200 a day or whatever. Um, I'm not 100% sure if I would follow that advice today, but yeah, essentially we didn't put out a lot of money for any of our talent, but in terms of like the people that we did bring together, it was a lot of people that I had worked with previously. So like
Mhm.
my co-star, maybe it wasn't even that I had worked with her previous actually. It was that like I had the previous film that I had like crowdfunded for, she was actually kind of neck and neck with the other person, and she didn't end up ultimately getting the role. And that was, no in no part from like her lack of talent. It's just like matching the part. But I always knew in the back of my head, like, oh, this is someone that I will want to work with in the future. And
Right.
yeah, her opportunity came up again. Um, but yeah, when it comes to cinematography, I mean, the cinematographer was someone that I'd worked with previously. My composer was originally someone I worked with originally, but then I had to replace him. But for me, again, having made 5 to 8 short films and being, making things for over a decade, a lot of people that I worked with on this feature were the people that I was really comfortable with working with in the past. I mean, even Patrick, obviously, like we had written a lot of scripts beforehand, but yeah, I would say most of the people in our team were people that I was already familiar with, and if not, then obviously like the people that I trusted, they kind of sourced the people that they knew, um,
Right.
that they trusted.
And yeah, there was still a lot of sort of randomness and openness. Like our other two producers, Nancy and Brielle, Nancy saw, because yeah, going back to our lead or our second lead role with Shu, who you were talking about, even though you knew her, we went through a full
Oh
audition
yeah,
process with that. Like we saw, I don't know, hundreds of reels, hundreds of tapes. Yeah, we called back, I don't know, something like 20, something in the neighborhood of like 20 actresses or something like that. It
Hmm.
was a decent amount.
yeah,
And she just sort of emerged as the favorite. But yeah, we sent out a casting flyer for that role and
I got
posted all over
it.
social. And Nancy just emailed us and she was just like, "Do you need?" I can't even remember. She volunteered to be production coordinator or something like
Yeah,
that. And
something. Yeah,
and then she ended up doing just like so much more. And so she ended up being a producer on the project. But yeah, we didn't
Okay.
know
Okay.
her
I
at
gotta go
all.
back here. I gotta go back here. You put out this casting notice. What was it like through breakdown services or actors access? Like, where did you
so
create the notice and where did you post it out into the world?
initially it was just like a flyer that we put out onto social media and
Like a
various Facebook
PDF
groups.
flyer or
Yeah,
JPEG
yeah,
flyer?
just like
Oh,
a
okay. Okay.
picture. Because I think that is like a thing that I see quite often on like Facebook and whatnot. Like, and surprisingly, yeah, like we put that out there to get like, and that was where I was getting most of my friends and family, and that's where, I mean, this to me, especially as an actor, really opened my eyes to like what casting really is like. Like that initial call, we got 300 people submitting, and we went through all of them,
Oof.
and that's quite a lot. To me, I was like, okay, that
Yeah.
seems about right for the number of, what we were looking for was like an Asian, union actress, 20s to 30s, etc. But then later on, we did get a casting director involved, and he put it out on the breakdowns. And when he put it out, we had 3,000 people submit. And that's where I was like, whoa, I thought there were 300 people that fit that demographic, but there's 3,000. It really did open my eyes to like just how staggering the competition is. But we did, I think we actually did go through like 100 tapes. We did ask 100 people to audition, and we whittled it down to, the one, as we keep kind of putting it. But yeah, I do think it was like I think it was like a really important part. I do think doing a very exhaustive casting process, it helped us realize what we wanted to see in the character and what we didn't want to see in the character, and it helped us arrive to, the person we ended up casting.
Man, of course. And what about the kind of third main role of the kind of host
Oh,
guy? Yeah.
Johnny Pemberton, yeah.
yeah. I mean, that was certainly, I mean, I don't know, maybe Patrick, you can talk. Like, I think we wrote that for him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I knew, yeah, we had kind of talked about you. So Stanley, you worked with him in 21 and 22 Jump Street. Like you guys were like in this sort of like a tandem role. And
Yeah.
and yeah, and you had stayed close to him over time, and like
Yeah.
he invited you to like what,
He would,
barbecues or something?
we weren't super close. Like, I do think that like this is a part of like indie filmmaking is that like you do maybe that is like maybe the one connection that really kind of like paid off in that. Yeah, Johnny is not someone that I see often. I mean, I don't even know the last time I did see him in person, but like I know he would invite me to like his birthday party once a year at most. So, but yeah, I think we were kind of writing it for him, but we didn't 100% know if he would accept. But
Mm.
we did eventually get the script to a certain point, and then we were like, hey, would you be open to taking on this role? And he read it and he's like, this is great. And he agreed. And yeah, I think that ended up working out pretty great because again, we did know write it for him. So I think with that in mind, we did write it to his strengths and he fell into it pretty well. I felt like, yeah.
Yeah. Just another great example of like using your resources, even though you didn't know the resource was available.
Yeah. I mean, I think it could have worked out if we had to cast it, if he had said no, but thankfully
Yeah.
he kind of is our star, I guess. Our celebrity of sorts,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Especially now after Fallout, check
Yeah,
it
that
out,
was
season
He's in
one.
Fallout.
He's in
yeah,
Fall.
that was
Yeah,
like
he's a big role in Fallout too. He's great in it.
yeah, that was a
Mm.
thing we didn't even know at the time. Like we just knew he was good. And I think all throughout, I think the movie is full of people who I had worked with and I recognized as talented people who had not gotten their break yet. And yeah, in some ways that makes it easier for them to accept or whatever. But yeah, I'd like to think that the movie is full of people who are really talented and hopefully this is kind of like a jumping off or springboard for their careers as well.
Yeah. So I did want to talk about something even more specific about the script and production, because I'm looking at the movie I'm writing, and I definitely thought about it in the same way, what resources are available, but also like, what are you asking of other people? And what are you asking even of your locations? And what you guys did that was really smart and should definitely be of note for this movie. And so I'll answer this question by asking questions. How many locations did you ultimately have in the movie?
It was two.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we built or we knew we wanted to like go to a house and shoot a lot there. And so like the whole middle portion of the movie is in this house. And
Right.
then the first third and the second and the last third are are in these futuristic apartments that we built on a sound stage. And it's like two different people's apartments, so it's two characters and you're following them. But we always had the intention of like just using one of these fake apartments and then dressing it differently and
Yeah.
lighting it differently so it would look like two different places. And that was really it. And everything else was on like a green screen or a blue screen. And then there's a bit of stop motion animation on it. But yeah, it was in
Right.
terms of like actual physical places, it was two.
And even to add on to that, like for us, we're like that house that we mainly shoot in, the whole conceit of the idea is that it's supposed to be a normal ass like
Mm,
2024 house that to our characters who are in a future where they've never left their kind of futuristic looking apartments, that's amazing to them. But
right.
to us, obviously, it's normal. So, like, in some ways, we were like dressing up the idea that this is a normal ass house by making it really cool to our characters. And then, in terms of our character's apartment, yeah, it was really futuristic and we added all these crazy lights and little set design things and all that. But it was ultimately like, I don't know how big, like
Yeah, it was
only
very
barely
small.
bigger than this like hotel room that I'm currently in. So like even that, like we built it, but it was also very small. It was, and
Yeah.
yeah, like we learned, I think it was a movie Cube, I think, like they only shot in one cube and they just kept changing the colors of it. It was the same thing for our movie. Like it was supposed to be two different apartments, but we just scheduled the shoot in a way that we shot all in one apartment, then restarted everything, redressed it, and then shot everything in the other apartment.
Yeah. That's just filmmaking like 101. That's what you have to do is like get the most out of the things you pay for, you know?
Yeah. But we also like
How,
wrote it in, yeah. Like
yeah.
from the yeah.
How many days how long was the shoot?
So for us, and to be honest, yeah, we shot, I'm trying to think.
It was 19 counting the extra day
Yeah,
that we were actually physically shooting.
we actually shot in two blocks.
Hmm.
We shot the house portions in one 9 day thing, and then we waited 3 months. That's like a whole other story, but we we had it our second chunk, and then we shot all the future and green screen stuff in the sound stage. So yeah, it was 18 days, and then we had one reshoot day where all that was essentially new. No, some of it was like stuff that we were just going to save because like it was fine. It was blue screen. We can kind of do it wherever. But yeah, it ended up being 19 days, which I don't know. Like since being on the festival circuit, I have realized that like that was a real luxury. I've been talking to a lot of people that are like, "Oh, I shot my
Yeah.
movie in 10 days, 12 days, 14 days," and I don't know. I felt like we were moving as fast as we could, and we did it in 19. So, I mean, I will say that like the days, like your amount of shooting days is like a big part of the budget. Like,
Right.
so
Well, yeah,
I,
and like and talking to a lot of people and hearing a lot of these stories, like, yeah, we had a few friends who were doing like friend rate or like, deferred rate on this, but we
Of course.
paid basically pretty much everybody. Like,
yeah,
and
we paid even at PAs. Yeah,
yeah, and like not an amazing rate, but like, above minimum wage rate, like the kind that you would expect on a low budget feature film. And when you hear these figures of like, we shot this in 10 days for like, $25,000 or something, it's just like so many, either your crew is scaled down so much that you just don't have many people to pay, and you're probably making a film that like has a visual look that reflects that. And that's not a dig. Like that can be also a conscious choice. Like
Right.
found footage can get away with that. Like there's this great YouTube movie called Milk and Cereal that's out there. They shot for like $800 and it was everybody working for free. And it was like that's an awesome accomplishment. And it's a cool movie too. But um but yeah, like if you don't have the luxury of like you can scale down the crew super small, or you just have a big collection of friends who are like, we'll do this, we'll go anywhere with you, like let's go, let's make this happen, then like yeah, you do kind of have to, it does, costs add up pretty fast unless you want to be the filmmakers who are like, we'll work with these people once and they'll hate us forever and never work
yeah,
with us again, but at least
Yeah.
we'll get what we have. Which yeah, we really tried to stay away from
yeah.
that.
Well, I
Having like
think
years of yeah, just really quick, having years of work on just other projects where we've been burned. Like we very much didn't want to do that. We very rarely went in overtime. You
that's
know,
great.
I feel like, yeah, we fed everyone really well, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like everyone was pretty happy about our set. So that was, I think, one thing that I'm really proud of is that no one was like stretched thin, I would think. Yeah.
And I think you're able to do 19 days, because I was surprised at that number, but when you pretty much basically have two locations, you can do longer. You know, when you're switching locations and you have to pick up a truck or drop it off, or you can't stage things and leave them there, you got to clean up after the end of every day. That adds costs and adds a pressure to your production, and that cuts into days, you know.
Yeah.
But when you can stay somewhere for a while, it's like that stretches the money. That's really, you
Yeah.
know, it ends up being a real smart choice. And then just like you said, you guys use this stage and change the lighting, and then within this story, this regular house becomes special because that's new to the characters. That's also like what you were saying when you referenced the milk and cereal. It's like, yeah, if you have a $25,000 budget in 8 days, maybe you have a handheld shaky camera look, because and it's like, well, that's a budget decision, but it's also a stylistic aesthetic decision too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
You
and
guys
and
had,
there's like I was just gonna say there's nothing wrong with that decision. It's just like you kind of have to know what you are and what you're doing and what your film
right.
is going to look and feel like and what you're trying to say with that. And
Yeah, just make it work for your story, right?
right. Yeah, because like ours was never going to be that, and so we kind of our shooting style had to reflect that.
Yeah.
But if you do like a quick, you can make a quick and dirty movie, and can work super well artistically. But it's just got to be, yeah, you just got to know what you are and what you have and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think again, adding to like that point, like I think what was really important for us was that we didn't want to make like a big idea and then like kind of do it small. We wanted to
Right.
do a small idea and tell it in the biggest and like most interesting and cool way possible. Um,
Yeah.
so whether or not, I don't know, in hindsight, I'm not sure we should have done that, but I think that was like the idea, and I think we executed that idea, and I'm proud of it for that. Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, it was a small movie. We didn't really overstretch anything. Like we're like, I think our big mantra also was like, let's just do this thing that we know that we can do, and let's do it in the best way possible. Like, and yeah, I think that's like
Yeah.
was a big part of this movie.
No, I think the creativity in this movie and the story is reflected in the story itself, and not in just a visual spectacle. It's like there's storytelling, twists and character reactions that the audience reacts to, you know. So
Yeah.
I think that's a phenomenal job. Also on shooting, you guys didn't have like extras.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, no
That's
extras. You never see the outside. So like
Mhm.
it didn't we had the same schedule every day because if you don't see the outside, then it doesn't matter. So all
right.
these things were written in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
we
had
just yeah, the team just put garbage bags on the windows, and so the time of day did not matter at all. I was like, that's like the best hack to like getting rid of sunlight issues. It's just like garbage bags on windows.
Man, I'm, I I seriously think that this podcast should lead to this movie really being a movie that's studied by low budget filmmakers, even people making shorts. It's like there's ways to think about your story. You can tell something that's inventive and creative, and sometimes you got to just find ways to do it within, like you said, the resources that you have.
Mhm.
Oh, one other question about shooting. So because it's like the guy's house and then you're at the girl's house, that house together. Do you know how many days each person shot? This is a big deal because especially if maybe you are in LA and you have some connections, you're like, oh, we're gonna get a name actor. We only need him for 2 days. We can shoot all his stuff or her stuff in 2 days. But it also is a thing to think about with cost and when you're writing. Like, oh, this scene is just with this character, or this character is in 10% of the movie or 90% of the movie. That's how many days they're going to be on set, right? So do you know who shot like the most days or which character was on set the most I know that's a like
I mean, I think the easiest, I think it was me. And
right.
maybe another
Well,
costing
you
thing
were
was,
also on set every day in another
yeah.
image, but
I
as an
mean,
actor,
granted, for per SAG rules, I did have to pay myself. And then per my contract with my reps, I had to pay them. So I did find it
yeah,
ironic that by paying myself, I was actually losing money by like giving a commission. But regardless, I still think in some ways it was a cost saving measure by casting myself in the lead. But Shu, I think, was maybe second, and I think I don't know, maybe she wasn't on set more than like 8 or 9 days as well.
mhm,
Uh, we obviously would schedule in a way that it would be consecutive and like we could shoot them out. But I think also a big thing was that so many of our characters in our movie are holograms, and even if they are in multiple scenes, they're mostly just shot behind a blue screen. So I actually was, it kind of like dawned on me as like, as I'm kind of going through the festival and stuff like that, is that like some of these characters that are actually in maybe 30% of the movie, like a major supporting role, we actually shot them out in like 2 hours or something because they're behind a blue screen. Like,
yeah,
it was actually relatively easy. Even Johnny, originally his role was only going to be on blue screen, and that would have been just one day. It would have been easy. We did
Yeah,
extend his role, and thankfully, he was open to the idea of, showing up in person, and I
yeah.
think that did help. But
Yeah, I think
yeah,
Johnny was in person like 2, maybe 3 days. And then, yeah, he had one blue screen day. And then every other character other than the two leads were, like Stanley said, shot out in a couple hours. And then, yeah, I think in terms of actual shooting days, both the leads had the same amount of days. Like early on in both segments, the house and the apartments, we had like a full like one Stanley day and one
hmm
Shu day. Shuang Hu, she's our other lead actress. She's great. Um, and then we had like the mixed days a little bit after that. But yeah, it was pretty tight and it was like really efficient too. Like everything was, everything kind of had to be shot um, sort of logistically rather than chronologically because of that.
but we actually
yeah,
did shoot chronologically, which I think was also sort of a benefit. Because going by our
Mm-hmm.
schedule, like if we were ahead on some days, we could just keep going. We're in the same place, we're in the same rooms. Like, what's to stop
right.
us? So I do think that was also like another thing that we wrote in that benefited us on the production side of things.
Right. In the house, we could just sort of, since nothing changed in the house, we could just sort of move forward
Yeah, like
as it goes. Yeah.
we could kind of like pre-dress a set for the next day. And if we were ahead, we're like, all right, let's just move in there. We kind of would
Yeah.
assess it day by day.
Let's skip ahead to okay, the movie's done. You had to raise more funds for post-production, you mentioned. So let's talk briefly about post and then get into like the festival circuit and where things stand now with the
Mm.
movie. How did post go and what were the factors that where you had to raise find some more money to do this crowdfunding campaign?
Well, I do think maybe another benefit was that I do have like a background in post, so like I do have some like editing experience, some color experience, some sound design experience.
hmm
So there were quite a few things that like I was able to handle on my own. A lot of like even the post coordinating and stuff like that was done just by me. But I did hire an editor. I think as much as I'd like to think that I know a lot of things, I for this one, I very much was like, I am okay with not holding all the hats. In fact, I tried to where I could to delegate
Yeah.
on previous things, but I did have an editor, but he was kind of more of a finishing editor of sorts because he was a working editor. Like
Yeah.
I think I'm a competent editor, but I got someone that I felt was better than me. His time was, kind of more valuable. Like our post process honestly was like, I think, was it 2 years? It was like quite long, maybe 18 months or something like that.
Well, we did have like I think what was interesting about our post process is we knew we had how many VFX shots?
Yeah,
300 and
like the quick statistics, I think it's like 357
Yeah.
VFX shots, and almost like our movie is like 82 minutes, and like 47 minutes of it has a VFX in it. So like
Mm,
that was going to take as long as it needed to take, especially because
Yeah.
I don't personally have VFX experience. Our VFX artist Marco Van Den Bogaard, I think that's his name.
Yeah.
Uh, that was just going to take as long as because he was also working like his own job. So like, yeah, that kind of also influenced how long things took. But he
Yeah,
did.
we knew. Oh no, sorry. It was like we just knew that like I think a lot of films post can be like really short if you want it to be because you just don't have like it's up to you. And this was the one case where it really wasn't up to us.
right.
We knew Marco had to finish these shots and we knew it was going to take a certain amount of time. So we knew we had this extra time to sort of to do kind of anything within that time frame and like yeah it wasn't because yeah post can be as short or as long as you want like people can be in
Well,
post for forever and you can kind of dawdle on it and never release it and so we kind of had a kind of a cool sort of functional deadline that was out of our hands that I think helped us in a way but it did extend the timeline like
Yeah,
um you know, we could have if it weren't a big VFX movie. You can wrap post pretty relatively
sure,
quickly. If,
sure.
so
So how has it been since the movie has been finished? And run through the festivals that you guys have screened at. Yeah, let's do that first. So, what festivals have you guys screened at?
so we world premiered at Cinequest. I mean, I will say we submitted to festivals early, and that is something that I regret. If I were to
Hmm.
do it again, just wait till your movie's done. Like, don't give
Yeah,
people excuses to like think that it's not going to be as good as it can be. If they have no idea who you are, then they're only going to assume the worst. Like, they're not going to think like, oh, this will be better from this. Like, they don't, they don't know.
yeah,
So
like if you have an established reputation somewhere or a relationship with the festival and they
right.
trust you to make something good, then like our next movie, we could potentially submit it early to Cinequest or something like that, and they might be like, "Oh, cool," you know. But if you don't have that pre-existing relationship or reputation, they're just going to assume you don't know what you're doing and you can't pull it off.
Yeah.
yeah. So we did submit early to the Sundances and whatnot, and we got rejected. And yeah, at the time that was a hard pill to swallow, but I do think in hindsight, it's like, I don't know, the competition has become so fierce for those festivals that like I'm not sure if we would have had a chance regardless. But that being said, I don't think it benefited us to submit early. But we did get into Cinequest, and but that was like having submitted, I think even a full year afterward. That was when we were like, okay. And I think, yeah, that year, that especially with the VFX and the music, I think was a big part. I will say, I think your movie really starts to come together in like the sound and color portion of things. So again, like if these festivals don't know who you are, just do yourself a favor and just wait till it's like in a more finished state. But yeah, we premiered Cinequest, which is like a strong Bay Area film festival. That was great. We won the audience award there. Um,
Congratulations.
yeah, yeah,
That's
Thank
thank
you.
awesome.
Yeah.
Let me think. We had
Next
Dance
one was Nevada City
Nevada
up
City.
in Northern California. Yeah, which is a kind of a shorts focused festival, and we were one of only, I think,
Three.
three narrative features that was there. So that was really cool.
Mm,
We were very we were like this is yeah, we were surprised to be one of that select few there.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, we were trying to hit any and all like niches that we might fill. Like our movie's sort of sci-fi, but not really. So we did submit to a lot of genre festivals, and we didn't get into any, which I guess in hindsight is fine. We did submit to a handful of Asian ones. I'm currently in Boston. We're going to be here for the Boston Asian Film Festival. So like we did get into this one, and then also the Asian American International Film Festival in New York, where we also won the audience award. So like we've been doing fairly well, kind of
Yeah.
getting in kind of festivals across the country. We've been getting audience awards and like almost most festivals that we've had like the ability to, I guess, win an audience award.
Yeah, we were
Um,
also at Dances with Films. That was our LA
yeah,
premiere.
LA
Um,
premiere.
Oh,
yeah, and that was cool. That was a great, it was a great screening for us.
Because that was kind of our hometown screening essentially. Yeah.
right.
But yeah, I mean, the response has been strong. It's been cool to go out, especially with this movie. I just think we made it for audiences. Like it's a comedy. Uh, it always has a strong response, and yeah, it's just been cool and fun. And like almost always, there's someone that like I feel like with every movie, you're like, does anyone really want to watch this? But like almost every time, someone like comes up and they're like, no, this is the exact like this is what I want to see. I want to see more of this. And it's always really cool to get that response, from people directly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think the movie surprises people too, because like it is when we made it, we weren't this was like if there's one thing we could go back and do, maybe it would be sort of project out what the response to it would be, just not just audiences, but like audiences, festivals, sales agents, just anyone. And we were just sort of trying to make the best thing we could under these parameters, like we described. Um, and what we ended up making was something that's actually pretty unusual. There's like, like you said, like at low budget, it's just like do horror, and like there's nothing wrong with that. I love horror. I love low budget horror. And there are several other genres that are like, or types of films that are sort of understood to be what indie filmmakers make at this budget level. And a sci-fi rom-com generally is not that. And
true.
so, and especially one where like the movie is it's weird, but it's not like purposefully like in your face, bizarre, you don't know what the hell's going on, like crazy, absurdist stuff, which is like a genre unto itself and tends to be the kind of thing that gets made at this budget level. So I think people look at it and they're like, I don't know about this. And then when they watch it, they're like, oh no, that was good. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting experience. And I think
Ah,
yeah, I think like no, and turning it into advice, it's like it is helpful to know what you have and what you're doing and where it fits in the landscape of everything that exists out there. Because yeah, that's like I think been our biggest challenge is like we made this thing that is just sort of, yeah, it's kind of a what is it? Um,
Yeah.
and and you can't blame people for reacting that way when you don't have a reputation and you like you don't nobody trusts you yet. And so it is kind of like, yeah, we really have to like convince people like, no. This
wait,
strange
so
thing that is good.
what did you mean by if you could have projected people's responses? Like, how would that have changed um, your planning or conception of the film, or in the marketing, or what would have changed?
I mean, from my perspective, and like, and maybe like I actually don't necessarily think a lot like this, actually, like in terms of hindsight, what I would have changed. I try and look forward more, but I think um setting a goal for ourselves beyond making the film and
Mm,
figuring out where we wanted it to go and what we wanted it to achieve could have changed things stylistically and perhaps story-wise. Because there are like, if you want it to go to X film festival, like there are things stylistically that you can do to help those chances. Um,
interesting.
or if you want it to be more mainstream, there are things, maybe not stylistically, but then it's like, okay, then we have to target name actors. Um,
Right.
because that's the only way you can break through there. And so just like thinking beyond we've made this movie and okay, what then? Um, can really inform what you do. And we didn't really do that. Um, So yeah, now that has landed us such a bigger challenge. Not that it's not a challenge if you do that.
Sure.
This stuff is really hard. Because yeah, we talk to people who did do that and are still struggling to break through just because
Right. Because
it's
there's no
tough.
guarantee,
Yeah.
even if you think,
Yeah,
yeah,
But you can make it easier on yourself.
yeah.
sure, sure. It's interesting. We might have to have so Patrick's a good friend of mine also, and want to have him on the team for my scripts, talented, and we've talked about it, and we might have to do another pod to kind of plan out, to
Yeah, like
strategize how
what is this? Yeah, yeah.
what that can be and where it can fit and other ways to market. Because, like you said, you go into Asian film festivals, it's like a sci-fi film, and I wonder if is there a partnership with Zoom that would have been possible with this movie, or I don't know who made the hologram Tupac. Could we get them on the phone? Like,
Uh,
are there partnerships to have been had, right? In a broad sense.
yeah, it's tough. Yeah, because I think on some level, like, and I've had friends describe it to me as well. It's just like what we did make is so unique to us that it is kind of cool that it is sort of this outlier.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's necessarily doing us all the favors either. Because, like, yeah, obviously it's an industry that, they tell you to do something original, but also not really. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell, I would say. Like, we're not, I keep telling people we're not quite on the other end of it yet. Like,
Right.
we
The
can only,
story is still to be told.
yeah, but we can see how there are certain things we could have done differently right now.
And is that affecting what you want to do next, the next projects you're looking at, and or are you guys collaborating again? Uh, yeah, moving forward, are you guys looking to do another shorter film, or what's on your mind?
Uh, I think
Not
the
shorter film, smaller budget film, right?
yeah,
Yeah, not short film.
actually, yeah, I mean that's kind of been a big thing. Like originally, I think even with this movie, we really, I think we almost had a plan. Like we're gonna make this one, and then we're gonna make another one that's another small. Like I think I was so gung ho about like not waiting for anybody anymore that I was like I really thought even by now we might have gotten like another one going and hitting the ground running. But I do think that the reality of like fully experiencing the entire cycle of this movie has made us rethink that like ultra low budget is anything under 300,000 like maybe there's a reason for
Hmm.
that. So like initially we were going to make another really small movie until as we were getting into the writing process, we were like, man, like we already wrote a really small movie and we still found that it cost way more than we thought. And that still wasn't enough. And yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe Patrick, you can kind of talk a little bit about that journey of
Yeah,
like
it's
landed us writing wise for the next one.
I think both Stanley and I are like attracted to this idea of like uh sustainability and sufficient self-sufficiency and like this idea of like um it would be great if we could just like make these little movies and like keep doing it and they pay for themselves and they find the right audience and just like I don't know, it's just like not counting on something that's, not counting on outcomes
Yeah.
for for your future. But and I think there was maybe a time like Stanley showed me this clip recently of Mark Duplass talking about one of his films, and he kind of tapped into that at a point. And I think there was kind of a point where that was true in indie film, but I think things have changed kind of drastically. And we don't know him, so maybe he would say something that contradicts what I'm saying, but it doesn't seem like that is as feasible now, just with the way the film market is. And so, because yeah, it would be cool to just be able, like, we don't want to wait for permission. Like, let's just make a bunch of cheap movies and sell them, and
Right.
they do well. But yeah, so now we're like kind of, I think we've ended up just sort of landing on, okay, this time our next film, we're going to just write it and we're not going to think about budget. and we are going to hope to sort of play the the game of, or like play the game a little more, as they say, and try and make it a little more through, not like a studio system type thing, but like a little more through the mechanics of the standard um indie budget system, where it's like finding more money, going after name actors, um and if we need to adjust the budget down, we can make story changes, but not thinking about it, from the ground up as much as we did the first
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
Um, and because we're working on a story. Stanley's originally from Louisiana, and he's got this really cool, like, specific family history, and so we kind of want to do something related to that, but in kind of our way, not in a like. Sorry, Stanley, it looked like you were about to say something.
No, I mean, yeah, I was gonna just mention that, like, I think a thing that we ran into is like, if we were to make our next movie within our resources again, like, is that something that we want to do again? And I felt like we kept running into this problem of like, even though we want to shoot our next movie in Louisiana, where I do have a lot more resources within my family, it still felt limited. Like the scope of our movie still felt small, and I do think that that sort of held us back in some ways with this movie. And it's not the, I guess, yeah, maybe just our ambition for what we want to do next kind of exceeded what we think we could accomplish within our resources. Yeah, that's
So
something.
in writing this next one, do you still have like a budget range in mind, even though it's not foremost? I guess like the first one was nothing's gonna stop us from making this, but it sounds like with this next one, it's like we need to get through the kind of indie system 2 to 5 million or 5 to 10 million, something like that.
I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, I guess at least to go to like a, even when it comes to like throwing up a number, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if we know what that means, like 2 to 5 or 5 to 10. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, objective, but like we don't even actually, like, we don't actually have the personal experience to know how much that scales. So I think that was something we realized,
Gotcha.
like, without the direct experience of knowing, I think at this joint,
Right.
like, we know what it takes to make an ultra low budget movie. Like we've done it at least once, but I think that was something
That's
we.
no, that's actually really interesting to me because I think, yeah, how would you know exactly what a $5 million movie is if you haven't
Yeah,
kind of been
yeah,
around it, or what's the difference between a $5 and $15 million movie other than you got a $5 million actor in one,
yeah,
like that's a good
yeah.
question, I think.
Yeah, kind of the only thing you can do, and the thing that I've been doing, I'm like kind of in the middle of writing it right now, and is just like looking at what exists in that range right now and being like,
Yeah.
this is kind of that, right? Like, and hoping that you're not missing something in your head that's like, oh no, actually there's a giant budget item that, this is not a 2 to 5, this is a 5 to 15, because forgot about this one thing. So
Yeah.
I feel like, I think we're just sort of aiming for 2 to 5, that sort of general range, just because there are
Kind of based
movies
on
that are
your kind of based on your comparisons more than anything.
yeah. And it seems like films, there are successful films out there in that range right now, getting made and getting attention and breaking through. And that's one of the things, is just, yeah, it's like, we're trying to think about what we want to accomplish with the film. And um we do want it to like get a, yeah, sort of break through, like Strange Darling is one that comes to mind recently. That was a film
Hmm.
that kind of I believe it is in that budget range, and it got a lot of buzz, and it's a very cool movie, and it's like, okay, that seems achievable
yeah.
in a number of ways, but in a very in in a, with a story that's something that no one else is going to do.
Yeah,
So yeah.
great. I think that's all the questions I have for you guys. I don't know if how you guys feel. Pretty
No,
good.
I mean, I think it was good. Yeah, it's because yeah, I think there are a lot of interesting aspects to the story of this movie that yeah, I'm always glad to share, you know. I mean, it's been a journey and yeah, I think it's like really important. Like I think you were mentioning earlier, like there's not a lot out there to kind of talk about the realities of it. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
glad to get our story out there.
Yeah, and I think just like it's so funny. There are just so many people, like, some people will tell you directly, but most of it's sort of this subtle signals of like you get so many like no's and so much sort of negative feedback or lack of feedback or lack of attention or something. And um it's easy to feel like what you did wasn't worthwhile or wasn't good.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so it's just like and of course we're gonna say this, but like we feel like what we made was really good. And we see that in the audience response. And it'll be interesting to see. We're still sort of finalizing exactly a release strategy, but it'll be out soon-ish. And I'm curious to see how people do end up reacting to it. Um, but like we know we like what we made and we feel like it's a good thing. And so yeah, I just think that's the most important thing you have to do is just like shut everything else out. Like listen to the feedback, listen to but like if uh, and like but take it all in and make what you want to make and stay convicted that way. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, yeah, it's so easy to give up and it's so easy to feel like, ugh, what did I just do? It's like, no, no, wait. We made a movie and it was good. And I think Stanley says this too. Like it's easier now than ever to make something. Um, and so there are obstacles, plenty. Obviously, money is the biggest one, but like, yeah, because it's become easier to do, then you can come up with reasons in your mind not to do it. And that tends to be like, people didn't love it. It didn't go viral. It wasn't,
Right.
a huge breakout hit at this festival or that festival. And so it's just like, yeah, I don't know. But it's still pretty cool. And we're still happy with it. And it's exciting when, we have a lot of friends doing the same thing. It's just so exciting when they do it
Yeah.
too. And we're just like, man, good
No,
job. Keep going.
no, I can totally understand that because number of projects that you have to look back at. And then even like Stanley was saying, it's because he did all these other shorts and all these other projects that you guys were able in a lot of ways to do future dates. So
Yeah,
sometimes it is just building the skills, the credibility, and even like the audience, the hidden audience that you don't even know are watching you,
Yeah.
that over time these things have to add, they just have to add up. What you put into the universe has to come back to you, right? So
yeah,
some
for
of it
sure.
has to come back.
Because I think another thing that I'm starting to realize now is that like, yeah, it's getting easier and easier to make things, but also like with the advent of internet and just like more streaming platforms and whatnot, like the avenues of distribution are kind of more open now than ever. So like even
Right.
getting it seen by as many people as possible is actually easier now than ever. Again, Patrick mentioned Milk and Cereal, and that was like a movie that I think they tried to get through festivals and it didn't do so well. They were gonna do kind of like a bad streaming deal, but they ultimately released it on YouTube and it found like it went viral. It like found a life through you as a YouTube movie. And I think that's also like a really interesting example is like this small thing that would have not have had a life in these like gatekept kind of avenues, they just put out to, the world and it did find a way,
Yeah.
and that maybe wasn't really a possibility before, and it is now.
100%. Well, thanks guys for coming on and having this conversation with me. Wish you best of luck with the rest of this film and the next film, and hope to see you guys soon.
Yeah, yeah. And good luck on your movie. You're maybe 2 or 3 years behind us, so hopefully
Yeah,
you'll be in the where we're at. We'll be able to talk about it again.
Well, it won't
yeah.
have
Hope
350 VFX shots,
Yeah.
so there
right.
is that part.
Yeah. Post to be a little, maybe a little
Yeah.
faster. All right, thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.